conversation with a pioneer at NASA Langley, an extraordinary woman whose math skills were so sharp, she was known as a human computer.
In 1961, 3 black women walked into NASA every single day and did math that kept human beings alive. They were underpaid, underclassified, and largely unknown, working in a building where someone had taken the time to put a colored label on the coffee pot so no one else would have to drink from the same machine. And then Hollywood made a movie about them. A movie that earned $236 million. A movie that beat Star Wars at the box office. A movie that made grown adults cry over a bathroom. A movie that cost $25 million and returned 9 times that. But here's what nobody tells you. Behind the scenes of Hidden Figures, there are stories that never made the final cut. Stories about what Hollywood quietly rewrote, what actresses were living through between takes, what actually happened in that bathroom scene, and why one of the most celebrated performances of the decade didn't receive a single Oscar nomination. The real story behind Hidden Figures is more bizarre, more infuriating, more inspiring, and more complicated than anything you saw on screen. And every single thing you're about to hear is real. Today, we're counting down 15 weird facts about Hidden Figures that you probably didn't know. Stay with us, because number 7 and number 3 are going to make you furious in completely different ways. Let's get into it. Fact 15. A film about discrimination had its soundtrack derailed by discrimination. Let's start with an irony so sharp it could cut glass. Gospel artist Kim Burrell recorded a track called I See a Victory with Pharrell Williams for the Hidden Figures soundtrack. It charted. It was Oscar eligible. In December 2016, she and Pharrell performed it on The Tonight Show and The Today Show. The awards campaign was building real momentum. She had a slot booked on The Ellen DeGeneres Show for January. And then, on December 30th, a video surfaced. In it, Burrell was preaching at her Houston church, calling gay people perverted, and doing it with considerable specificity. Now, here's the part you need to sit with for a second. Ellen DeGeneres is one of the most prominent gay women in American entertainment. She has spent her entire career as a public figure, being a target of exactly the kind of language Burrell used that day. Ellen's response to the booking was one tweet. Just one. For those asking, Kim Burrell will not be appearing on my show. That was it. Pharrell released a statement condemning discrimination without naming Burrell directly. Janelle Monáe, who starred in the film, condemned it by name. The Ellen performance never happened. The awards' momentum stalled. Burrell said she had been taken out of context. The video suggests otherwise. And so, a film built around 3 women fighting discrimination, a film about being told you don't belong in the room, had its own soundtrack sidelined because one of its performers was publicly telling other people they didn't belong in the room either. The irony doesn't land softly. It lands like a brick. Fact 14. The director chose Hidden Figures over Spider-Man, and it's more complicated than it sounds. On a Friday night, director Theodore Melfi was deep in the final stages of consideration for Spider-Man: Homecoming. That film would go on to gross $880 million worldwide. It was, by every Hollywood standard, the safest possible bet. Then his agent called with something else, a 55-page book proposal about 3 black female mathematicians at NASA.
There was something named after her at NASA, so you really get the feeling these were real women, one still alive.
He read it over the weekend. Monday morning, his answer was simple: get me out of Spider-Man. Now, understand what that decision looked like from the outside. Melfi's most recent film was St. Vincent, a Bill Murray comedy from 2014. He hadn't had a major release in 2 years. Nobody was rushing to greenlight a period drama about women most of the country had never heard of. The studio wasn't pushing. The machinery of Hollywood wasn't behind it. Producer Donna Gigliotti later told The Hollywood Reporter that within a week of reading the script, Melfi was in her office saying, flat out, "Please let me direct this." Here's what happened next. Hidden Figures earned $236 million worldwide. It beat Rogue One at the domestic box office in its opening weekend, from 1,686 fewer theaters. It earned an A+ cinema score in every single demographic, a grade that only a handful of films in the entire history of cinema have ever achieved. Spider-Man: Homecoming made $880 million. The gap between those two numbers is enormous. But here's the question nobody's quite sure how to answer. Which decision was right? A director walking away from a guaranteed $880 million franchise to make a $25 million prestige drama about three women history forgot? You tell us in the comments. But however you feel about it, the math on Hidden Figures is extraordinary. Fact 13. Glenn Powell was broke, and he almost thought he'd ruined everything. When Chris Pratt passed on the role of John Glenn, Glenn Powell got the call. His words about it later were vintage Powell. After Chris Pratt passed, I got a shot at it, which is just how life works. Chris Pratt gets the first shot at everything. But here's what was happening behind that casual tone. Powell had turned down more financially stable TV work that year specifically to take Hidden Figures. He later described himself as flat broke. This film was essentially his only job that year. Everything was riding on it. Then he watched an early rough cut. No music, no sound design, no visual effects. Just the raw footage. He left the screening room, walked to the bushes on the Fox lot, and was physically ill. He told a podcast later, "I thought I ruined this movie. I was like, all these women put in these great performances. I literally ruined this movie." He did not ruin the movie. Glenn Powell is now one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. He has a franchise. He has the kind of career where Chris Pratt would probably consider turning down a role to make something Powell is attached to. And the film that started all of it was the role he got because someone else said no, and which he watched in its unfinished state, while convinced he had destroyed it from the inside. The role everyone gets when Chris Pratt says no might just be the most important role in Hollywood. Fact 12. The night Hidden Figures got called the wrong name twice. The 2017 Golden Globes should have been a triumph for Hidden Figures. The film was nominated. The cast was there. The world was watching. And then it happened. NBC correspondent Jenna Bush Hager approached Pharrell Williams on the red carpet. Pharrell, the man who produced and scored the film, and opened with, "So, you're nominated for Hidden Fences." Read that again. Hidden Fences. Not Hidden Figures. Not Fences, the other nominated film. A merger of the two. Two films with predominantly black casts, both nominated that night, collapsed into one title by a reporter interviewing one of the people who made one of them. Pharrell's face registered confusion.
There's a lot of powerful women that came together, and I don't think we've ever seen this many women come together on such a big and bright and...
He said nothing. He let it go. She kept going. The phrase trended on social media within minutes. Then, later that same evening, presenter Michael Keaton stepped to the podium, announced Octavia Spencer's nomination, and called the film Hidden Fences. Two people. Same night. Same mistake. Different moments. Jenna Bush Hager came back the next morning with a tearful on-air apology. Pharrell responded with a tweet. "Everyone makes mistakes. Hidden Fences does sound like an intriguing movie, though." And Octavia Spencer, a woman nominated for playing Dorothy Vaughn, a woman who had spent years being denied a title that matched her actual work, simply said, "We all make mistakes." The grace in that response is almost unbearable. The woman playing the character, who ran a division for 2 years before anyone would put it in her job title, was watching her film get called the wrong name on national television, and chose grace. The night Hidden Figures was supposed to be celebrated, two separate people couldn't keep two separate black films straight, and the people who made it responded with more dignity than the night deserved. Fact 11. The actress playing Katherine Johnson had never heard of Katherine Johnson. Tora G.P. Henson attended Howard University, one of the most prestigious, historically black universities in America. She enrolled in electrical engineering before switching to acting. She was, in other words, exactly the kind of person you would expect to know about a black female NASA mathematician who changed the course of space exploration. She had no idea Katherine Johnson existed. She told Deadline she hadn't heard of any of it. Not Johnson, not Dorothy Vaughn, not Mary Jackson, none of them. And then she named Ron McNair, a black NASA astronaut who died in the Challenger disaster in 1986, who had himself attended a historically black college, and said something that stopped the room. If it wasn't for Katherine Johnson, there would have been no Ron. But, hey, who am I? Never heard of her. When she read the script for the first time, she said she wasn't moved. She was hurt, because she had spent her entire childhood being told that math and science were for boys.
Oh, there's tons of stories, one of them being the importance of women and minorities to our science, math,
And here was ironclad proof that women who looked exactly like her had been doing it. Not just doing it, but doing it at the absolute highest level, for decades. And no one had told her. Think about what that means for a second. The woman chosen to bring Katherine Johnson's story to millions of people around the world was someone that story had been deliberately kept from. That's not just an irony. That's the whole point of the film, compressed into one person. Fact 10. The real bathroom hero, and the Hollywood version that replaced her. You know the scene. Kevin Costner, crowbar, a segregated bathroom sign being ripped off the wall, a speech about how at NASA the bathrooms belong to everyone. The audience goes wild. It's one of the most cathartic moments in the film. Here's what director Theodore Melfi admitted to Vice News. He invented all of it. The walk across campus, the speech, the crowbar. None of it happened. He said plainly, there needs to be white people who do the right thing. So he wrote in a fictional white supervisor, handed him a power tool, and gave him the speech. But here is the real story, and it is so much better. There was a woman named Miriam Mann, described in Margot Lee Shetterly's book as not even 5 feet tall, feet barely grazing the floor when she sat. And every single day, when Miriam Mann walked into the Langley cafeteria and saw the cardboard sign on the colored computer's table, she picked it up, put it in her purse, and took it home. They would make a new one. She would take that one too. Shetterly describes her arriving each morning like a woman with a specific task. Spot the sign, into the purse, gone. At some point, the sign went into Miriam Mann's purse and never came back. She didn't file a formal complaint. She didn't lobby for a policy change. She didn't wait for a supervisor with authority over the building to come in and make a dramatic gesture. She just removed the problem every day with her handbag until the problem no longer existed. Miriam Mann does not have a single line in the film. The woman who actually did the work got replaced by a fictional man with a crowbar, and Hollywood called that progress. Fact 9. The computer built to replace her made her irreplaceable. When the head of West Area Computing left in 1949, Dorothy Vaughn stepped in.
The women who were adding up, the men who were adding up, they called them computers.
She supervised the group, advocated for her women's pay and promotions, and ran the division with the precision and authority of someone who absolutely knew what they were doing. And A.C. Hay, the precursor to NASA, responded by holding her in an acting role for 2 full years. Shetterly's book notes they were waiting for, and this is the actual language, a more acceptable candidate to materialize. 2 years, running the division, acting supervisor, waiting for someone more acceptable to show up. Nobody showed up. The memo making it official arrived in January 1951. Dorothy Vaughn became NACA's first black supervisor and one of its very few female supervisors of any race. Nobody said thank you. They just changed her title. And then the IBM 7090 arrived. This machine filled an entire room. It had to be cooled to near-polar temperatures to stop its vacuum tubes from overheating. And nobody, not the engineers, not the IBM technicians who had installed it, could get it running. It just sat there, an enormous, expensive, room-sized problem. Everyone else saw a threat. Dorothy Vaughn saw an opening. She went to the library. The only Fortran textbook available was shelved in the whites-only section. She took it anyway. She taught herself the programming language after hours, then went back and taught every single woman in her division. When the IBM technicians finally hit a wall, Vaughn was the one who made the machine run. The computer built to replace her made her irreplaceable instead. Decades later, a historian asked her how she had coped. The 2-year acting role, the discrimination, the held-back promotions, all of it. Her answer was 11 words. I changed what I could, and what I couldn't, I endured. 11 words for 28 years. Fact 8. She broke down NASA's door, then rebuilt it so others could follow. Mary Jackson wanted to be an engineer. The only graduate program that would get her there required a night class at Hampton High School. Hampton High School did not admit black students. Jackson went before a Virginia judge and petitioned the city of Hampton for special permission to attend. She won. She showed up. She did the coursework. In 1958, Mary Jackson became NASA's first black female engineer, and, at that moment in history, quite possibly the only black female aeronautical engineer working anywhere in the entire country. She co-authored 12 technical research papers. She reached the highest engineering title the agency had available, and then she stopped climbing. Not because she ran out of ability. She ran out of ceiling. By 1979, it was clear that no further promotions were coming her way, no matter what she produced. So she made a decision that most people would struggle to fully appreciate. She accepted a demotion. She took a pay cut. She moved into Langley's Federal Women's Program, where she quietly rebuilt NASA's hiring pipelines from the inside, making sure the doors she'd crowbarred open didn't seal themselves shut behind her.
She worked at NASA Langley during the 50s, a woman and an African American busting through barriers.
21 years breaking through. Another 6 years holding the door open for whoever was coming next. When NASA named its Washington headquarters building after her in 2020, her daughter said she was a scientist, humanitarian, wife, mother, and trailblazer. All of that, and still the kind of person who, once she got through the door, immediately started worrying about who was still outside. Read that sentence again. That is one of the most extraordinary things ever said about another person. Fact 7. The real Katherine Johnson didn't need a savior. Hollywood gave her one anyway. We need to come back to that bathroom scene, because the crowbar wasn't the only thing Theodore Melfi invented. He admitted it directly to Vice News. The walk across campus, invented. The speech, invented. The entire Kevin Costner moment that audiences stood up and cheered for, invented. Here is what actually happened. Katherine Johnson walked into the nearest restroom and used it. Regardless of what the sign on the door said, Margot Lee Shetterly's book states it directly. Johnson refused to so much as enter the colored bathrooms. There was no confrontation, no supervisor, no speech, no power tools. She simply walked into the bathroom that was closest to where she was working. In 1961 Virginia, when defying segregation signs carried real, serious, potentially life-altering consequences. She didn't need anyone's permission. She didn't wait for authority to come down from above and make it safe. She just did it, quietly, every day. When Melfi was asked why he created a fictional white boss to make the moment happen, he said, and this is a direct quote, "There needs to be white people who do the right thing." Let that breathe for a moment. The real Katherine Johnson was already doing the right thing, alone, every single day, in the Jim Crow South, without a crowbar, without a speech, without Kevin Costner anywhere in the vicinity. Hollywood looked at that and decided it wasn't cinematic enough, so they gave her a savior. The audience cried at the invented scene, and the real one, the quieter, braver, lonelier one, got cut. Fact 6. Taraji Henson filmed the breakdown scene while living one. The bathroom monologue is arguably the most powerful scene in the film. Katherine Johnson, soaking wet, finally breaking down. She explains, to Kevin Costner's character, to the camera, to every person in the theater, that she runs half a mile to a segregated bathroom every single day, in any weather, because that is simply where the bathroom is.
Kevin Costner became a Hollywood megastar for his powerful performances in films like...
She describes working like a dog while living off coffee from a pot that none of her co-workers will touch. It's devastating. It's one of the finest performances Taraji P. Henson has ever delivered. Here's what was happening between every single take. Henson revealed on the Legacy Talk podcast that while filming that sequence, a loved one was in crisis off-set. Her makeup artist had the phone. Between takes, Henson was running down the hallway trying to keep this person on the line, trying to figure out how to get them help, specifically, how to get the right people to them without making the situation worse. She was managing a real emergency, in real time. between takes of a scene about the price of being a black woman in America who doesn't get to fall apart because there's always somewhere else she's needed. Her words, "I was present. I did it." And then as soon as they yelled cut, I was running back down the hall.
The most celebrated performance of Taraji P. Henson's career.
The one that should have earned her an Oscar nomination and, by most accounts, didn't, was delivered in fragments, between genuine emergencies, by a woman who was barely in the room, and not one frame of it shows. Fact 5. The woman they kept out was the only one John Glenn trusted. The IBM 7090 had calculated John Glenn's orbital trajectory. Glenn didn't trust it. His exact request to the engineers, "Get the girl to check the numbers. If she says they're good, I'm ready to go." Katherine Johnson spent a day and a half rerunning every single calculation by hand on a desktop mechanical calculator. The numbers matched. Glenn launched on February 20th, 1962.
The aim to put America's astronaut into orbit of the Earth. The entire U.S. was rooting for Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn.
Orbited Earth 3 times and came home safely. Now here is what the film doesn't fully land. The same woman John Glenn staked his life on had spent years fighting just to be in the room where these missions were planned. Women didn't attend Space Task Group briefings, not because of any written rule or official policy, but simply because nobody had thought to question whether they should. Johnson asked if there was a law against it. There wasn't. So she started showing up, every time, without making it a confrontation, without waiting for anyone's permission, without a crowbar or a speech. She just showed up until they stopped asking her to leave. And eventually, the most trusted brain in the room was also the one the institution was still conducting an informal internal debate about whether it should have hired in the first place. John Glenn staked his survival on her specific mind. The agency was still not entirely sure she belonged in the hallway. Both things were true at the same time. Fact 4. Hidden Figures beat Star Wars, and Hollywood had no idea it was coming. Opening weekend, January 2017, the industry had projected Hidden Figures at somewhere between $16 million and $18 million. Solid for a prestige drama. Respectable. Nothing spectacular. What actually happened? Hidden Figures earned $22.8 million from 2,471 theaters. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, earned $22.1 million from 4,157 theaters. Hidden Figures had 1,686 fewer locations, and it still finished first. The audience that showed up was 64% women and 37% African American, two demographics that Hollywood had spent decades treating as supplemental, unreliable at the box office, not the core. Those two groups showed up in numbers that buried a Star Wars movie on its home turf. The film earned an A+ cinema score in every single demographic. That grade has been achieved by only a handful of films in cinema history, not a few dozen. A handful. Final worldwide gross, $236 million, on a $25 million budget. 3 women who spent their careers being quietly told they didn't belong in the room had a film made about them, and that film went to #1 at the global box office against the most powerful franchise in entertainment history. Hollywood was surprised. It really should not have been. Fact 3. The Oscar snub that proved the movie's own point. Hidden Figures received 3 Oscar nominations: Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress for Octavia Spencer, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Taraji P. Henson, who is in virtually every scene, who delivers the bathroom monologue that broke the entire theater, who carries the full emotional architecture of the film on her shoulders, received nothing, not even a nomination. Theodore Melfi was asked about it directly. He told HuffPost he was disappointed, and then offered his theory. The Academy, he suggested, couldn't separate Cookie Lyon from Katherine Johnson. Henson was in the middle of full production on Empire. The Academy apparently couldn't see past the character she was playing on television to the performance she was delivering on screen. Here's the kicker. Henson showed up to the Oscars anyway. She sat in that room in her gown and she cheered for everyone else. And on the red carpet, when an reporter asked about the film, she said, "When Ted Melfi sent me the script, I read it, and I immediately got upset because I felt a dream had been stolen from me." She wasn't talking about the nomination. She was talking about Katherine Johnson, about growing up never knowing this woman existed. The film about black women not getting credit for their work did not get its lead actress any credit for her work, and she still came. For the film, for the women, not for herself.
Katherine Johnson attended the ceremony too. She was 98 years old and arrived in a wheelchair. The cast brought her out on stage to present an award. She leaned toward the microphone. The room stood before she reached it. She said 2 words, "Thank you." Then she sat back down. And Hollywood spent the rest of the evening figuring out what exactly
it was thanking her for. Fact 2. Her hometown gave up on her. Her father didn't. Catherine Coleman was born in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, in 1918. The local segregated school system offered education to black children through the 8th grade. That was the ceiling. That was the legal limit of what the county was required to provide. She finished 8th grade at 10 years old. Her hometown had literally nothing left to teach her, and no legal obligation to try. Her father, Joshua, looked at what the county had decided about his daughter's future and made a different decision. He packed up the family and drove 120 miles to Institute, West Virginia, where she could attend high school on the campus of a historically black college. They didn't petition. They didn't protest. They moved. She graduated high school at 14. At West Virginia State, a mathematics professor named W.W. Schiffelin Claytor, the 3rd black man in American history to earn a Ph.D. in mathematics, told her she had the mind of a research mathematician. And then he did something that professors almost never do. He followed through on it. He created a brand new course, Analytic Geometry of Space, and offered it to the college. He built the course for her specifically. She graduated summa cum laude at 18.
Graduating summa cum laude from college at the age of 18, becoming a career mathematician seemed to be the most natural fit.
With degrees in mathematics and French. In 1939, she became the first black woman ever admitted to West Virginia University's graduate program. She left after 1 semester to start a family. She never went back for the degree. Decades later, she calculated the orbital trajectories that sent human beings to the moon, and then she sent them home again.
Her calculations helped launch the first American into orbit and were used for America's first moon landing.
NASA never asked whether she'd finished her graduate degree. The county that refused to build her a high school produced the woman who figured out how to leave the planet. Fact 1. Katherine Johnson's recognition came 33 years late. She thought they were crazy. She worked at NASA for 33 years. Missions plotted: Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, the moon landing. She retired in 1986. She went home to Hampton, Virginia, and for nearly 3 decades after that, she was not famous. She was a retired mathematician who had helped hold the architecture of the American space program together, and the world had moved on without noting it. In 2015, 29 years after she retired, President Obama gave her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She was 97 years old. In 2017, NASA named a $23 million, 37,000 square foot research facility after her at Langley. She attended the ribbon cutting at 99. They asked what she thought. She laughed and said, "You want my honest answer? I think they're crazy." When she had started at NACA in 1953, her official classification was sub-professional, a category designed specifically to rank her below male engineers, regardless of what she was actually doing, regardless of whether anyone in the building could do it without her. 33 years of work. First public recognition at 97. She wasn't being falsely modest. She genuinely did not understand the fuss. She had asked questions. She had gotten answers. The answers had kept rockets on course and brought astronauts home alive. That was the transaction as she understood it. "I liked what I was doing," she told the crowd at the facility opening. "I liked work. I liked the stars and the stories we were telling. Not a hero, just someone who loved mathematics, who, at 97, was mildly surprised to discover that the rest of the world had finally caught up." Katherine Johnson passed away in 2020 at 101 years old. And there you have it, 15 facts about hidden figures that never made it into the film itself. The real story, as it almost always is bigger, stranger, and more powerful than the version that ended up on screen. Here's what we want to know. Which of these hit hardest for you? Was it the woman who took the sign home in her purse every single day until it disappeared? The performance that was delivered in pieces between a real-life crisis, the astronaut who refused to launch without one specific woman's math, or the recognition that came 33 years after the work was done? Tell us in the comments. And while you're down there, which film should we cover next? If you're new here, hit subscribe. We do deep dives like this every week on the films that shaped the culture, and we're just getting started. Until next time.